My name is Elena. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 3 years, I've poured every ounce of my soul, every dollar from my savings, into a little bungalow on Maple Street. It wasn't just a house to me. It was a sanctuary, a promise I made to my grandmother, and the one place on earth that was truly mine. That is, until last Tuesday, when my father called and gave me an ultimatum that would shatter my world. "Elena," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "you're selling the house. Your sister Chloe needs it, and we've decided this is what's best for the family." The line went quiet, but his words echoed in my ear like a gunshot. He wasn't asking. He was telling me. And in our family, what my father decided was law. He had no idea what he had just set in motion. He thought he was closing a chapter on my little project, but he was actually handing me the pen to write a completely different story, one he never, ever saw coming. If you've ever felt like your own family was your biggest obstacle, or if you've ever had to fight for something you love, then you know exactly where I am right now. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, because this story is a wild ride. Before I tell you about the impossible choice they forced on me and the secret plan it sparked, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. To understand why my father's demand was so devastating, you have to understand my family. We're like a solar system, and my younger sister, Chloe, is the Sunday. Everything and everyone has always revolved around her. She's 2 years younger than me, beautiful, charming, and has this incredible talent for making her problems everyone else's. Growing up, if Chloe scraped her knee, the world stopped. If I came home with a perfect report card, my parents would glance at it and say, "That's nice, honey," before turning their attention back to Chloe's latest drama, a fight with a friend, a boy who didn't like her back, a C- on a test that was totally the teacher's fault. I learned early on to be the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never needed anything. I became an architect, specializing in landscape and historic preservation, a field that requires patience, precision, and a love for things that have a soul. Chloe, meanwhile, floated through life on a cloud of our parents' support, trying to become a lifestyle influencer, a career that seemed to mostly involve taking pictures of expensive brunches that I knew for a fact she couldn't afford. The house on Maple Street was my inheritance from my grandma Isabella, my dad's mother. She was my person. While my parents were busy orbiting Chloe, my grandmother was my rock. She was the one who saw my passion for design, who bought me my first drafting kit, who told me that building something beautiful and lasting was one of the most important things a person could do. The bungalow was her home. It was small, a little worn down, but it had what architects call good bones. It had character. When she passed away, she left it to me in her will, with a handwritten note that said, "For my Elena, who I know will make this old house sing again." It was the single most meaningful thing anyone had ever given me, and I took her words to heart. The house was in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was on the brink of a renaissance. I saw its potential when no one else did. For 3 years, I dedicated my life to its restoration. I didn't just write checks to contractors. I was there. Every single day after my 9-to-5 job at the firm, I learned how to lay reclaimed hardwood floors, my knuckles raw and bleeding. I spent weeks stripping layers of old paint to reveal the original, intricate woodwork around the windows. I found a hidden fireplace behind a plaster wall and painstakingly restored the original 1,920 seconds tile work. My best friend, Ben, a contractor I'd known since kindergarten, was my partner in crime. We'd spend our weekends covered in sawdust and drywall dust, fueled by cheap pizza and the shared vision of what this house could be. He'd teach me how to frame a wall, and I'd teach him about the historical significance of crown molding. The house was our project, our passion. The garden was my masterpiece. As a landscape architect, this was my canvas. I spent a fortune I barely had on heritage plants, creating a 4-season garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. I built a stone patio by hand, each stone placed with intention. The backyard became an oasis, a secret garden in the middle of the city. The house wasn't just renovated, it was reborn. It was a living, breathing testament to my love, my skill, and my dedication. My parents and Chloe visited exactly once during this entire process. They walked through the dusty, chaotic construction zone, and Chloe wrinkled her nose. "It's so small," she'd said, tapping on her phone. "And the neighborhood is kind of sketchy." My dad had clapped me on the shoulder with a patronizing smile. "It's a nice little hobby for you, Elena. Good to keep you busy." They didn't see the vision. They didn't see the soul. They just saw a run-down house in a part of town they'd never willingly visit. They had no idea that while I was uncovering the history of the house, I was also setting myself up for a future they couldn't even imagine. They also had no idea that the city's revitalization project was about to turn Maple Street into one of the most sought-after locations in the entire state. A little detail I had discovered through my professional connections. A detail I kept very, very quiet. So when my father called, it wasn't just about a house. He was demanding I give up the one thing that was unequivocally mine, the legacy from the only person who ever truly saw me, the physical embodiment of my own hard work and talent. And for what? For Chloe. The reason, he explained in that same phone call, was that Chloe and her latest boyfriend, a guy named Rick who had big ideas but no actual job, wanted to settle down. They needed a house, a start in life. And since I was single and had a perfectly good apartment, it was only fair that I give Chloe her chance. "She can't afford a down payment, Elena," my dad had said, his voice laced with that familiar, weary disappointment he reserved for Chloe's failures. "And this is a way the family can help her. We'll pay you, of course. We've had a look at the property records. It's valued at about what you paid for it before you started messing with it." He was talking about the tax assessment value, a number that hadn't been updated in 5 years and didn't reflect a single bit of the renovation or the neighborhood's skyrocketing potential. He was essentially asking me to hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, not to mention 3 years of my life. I tried to argue, to explain the value, the work, the sentimental connection. He cut me off. "This isn't a negotiation, Elena. This is what's happening. We are your parents, and we know what is best. You need to do this for your sister, for the family." And that's when I felt something inside me shift. The years of being the good, accommodating daughter began to crumble, and in the dust, a new resolve began to form. They thought they could just take this from me. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The days following my father's phone call were a masterclass in psychological warfare. It was a full-scale pressure campaign, orchestrated by my parents with a chilling level of coordination. They had a single objective: to break my will and force me to sign over the house. And they came at me from all angles, using every tool in their manipulative arsenal. The first wave was what I call the guilt trip offensive, and it was led by my mother. She would call me at work, her voice a soft, sorrowful whisper that she had perfected over years of managing family crises. "Elena, honey," she'd begin, "I just got off the phone with your sister. She was crying, absolutely inconsolable. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her pristine living room, swirling a glass of Chardonnay, her brow furrowed with performative concern. She feels so lost, so hopeless. All she wants is a little piece of stability, a place to call home. And you have that, Elena? You've always been so strong, so capable. Chloe, well, you know Chloe. She's more fragile. She needs this." I tried to reason with her, explaining that I had built my life around that house, that my financial future was tied up in its equity. I told her about the long nights, the sacrificed weekends, the sheer physical labor. Her response was a sigh that dripped with disappointment. "But honey, it's just a thing. It's wood and nails. Family is what matters. Are you really going to put a house before your sister's happiness? Before this family's peace?" Every conversation was a subtle accusation. My success was a weapon I was using against my fragile sister. My financial prudence was selfishness. My love for my home was a character flaw. She would weave in little jabs about how much they had sacrificed for both of us, how they only wanted to see both their daughters happy and secure. But since Chloe was clearly not secure, the burden fell on me to correct this cosmic imbalance. It was exhausting. Each call left me feeling drained and questioning my own reality. Was I being selfish? Was the house really more important than family? That was the insidious genius of her approach. It made me feel like the villain in my own story. Then came the second wave, the rational man tirade, personally delivered by my father. His approach was completely different. There was no soft persuasion, only blunt, unyielding logic, or at least what he considered logic. He would call in the evenings, catching me when I was tired and my defenses were down. "Elena, let's be realistic," he'd start, his tone that of a CEO addressing an underperforming employee. "You're a single woman. What do you need a whole house for? It's a financial drain. Property taxes, insurance, upkeep, it's a burden. Your apartment is more practical for your lifestyle." He completely ignored the fact that the house was a brilliant investment, that my mortgage was less than my rent had been, and that the property value was exploding. He had his narrative, and he stuck to it. He presented the sale as if he were doing me a favor, freeing me from a responsibility I was ill-equipped to handle. He then moved on to the numbers, which was the most infuriating part. "We've had an appraiser do a drive-by," he announced one night. A drive-by. Not an actual appraisal where someone walks through and sees the custom kitchen, the restored floors, the spa-like bathroom I had designed myself. No, a guy who slowed down his car out front. He says, considering the area, 180,000 is a very fair price. I almost choked. I had already spent nearly 70,000 on materials alone, not to mention my own unpaid labor, which Ben estimated was worth at least another 100,000. Houses of a similar size, unrenovated, were already selling for over 250,000 in the neighborhood. I knew, from a market analysis I had run myself, that my house could easily fetch 350, maybe even 400,000. "Dad, that's an insane number," I told him, my voice shaking with anger. "That's less than what I owe on the mortgage plus the renovation costs. You're asking me to take a massive financial loss." His response was cold and immediate. "Don't be dramatic, Elena. The price is the price. This is a family transaction, not a corporate merger. We're helping you by taking it off your hands, and we're helping Chloe by giving her a home. It's a win-win." There was no arguing. To him, the facts were irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was his decision. The final, and perhaps most painful, part of the campaign came from Chloe herself. She wouldn't call with arguments or logic. She would text. Long, rambling, emoji-filled texts sent in the middle of the night. They were a bizarre mix of feigned innocence and passive-aggressive digs. "Ellie," one began, using a childhood nickname no one had used in years. "I'm so excited about the house. Rick and I were looking at paint swatches today. I'm thinking a really cute millennial pink for the front door. I know you love all that dark old wood stuff, but we're going to brighten it up and make it young and fun. Can't wait." She was talking about gutting my grandmother's house, about painting over the beautiful, restored oak door I had spent a month working on. She was describing the destruction of my work as if it were a fun little project we were sharing. Then, the kicker. "Mom and Dad told me you were being a little hesitant, and I get it. It was your first little project and you're probably attached. But you have to think about my future, too. I'm not smart like you. I haven't had the same opportunities. This is my one chance to have something real." It was a dagger to the heart. She was framing her own lack of effort and ambition as some kind of cosmic injustice that I was now obligated to rectify. She made me feel guilty for my own hard work. Ben was my only anchor to sanity during this time. He'd come over to my apartment after a long day of work, find me staring at the wall, and just sit with me. "You can't let them do this, Elena," he said firmly one night, his eyes full of a protective fire that warmed me to my core. "This isn't about what's fair. This is about them stealing from you. They are bullies. Your dad is a bully, and your sister is a professional victim. Don't you dare let them win." He was right, of course. My head knew he was right. But my heart, conditioned by a lifetime of trying to earn my parents' approval and keep the peace, was wavering. The constant, relentless pressure was wearing me down. I started to have trouble sleeping. I couldn't focus at work. The joy I once felt thinking about my beautiful house was replaced by a knot of anxiety in my stomach. They were chipping away at my resolve, day by day, call by call, text by text. And I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to give in, to just sign the papers and let them have it, just to make the noise stop. That was their goal, of course. To make the fight so miserable that surrender felt like relief, and it was dangerously close to working. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. I had just gotten home from a grueling day at work, and my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a photo of Chloe, tears streaming down her face. The caption read, "She's been like this all day. My heart is breaking. Please, Elena, end this." That was it. That was the final blow. The expertly deployed image of my sister's distress, designed to trigger every last bit of my conditioned guilt. I felt something inside me just snap, not with a bang, but with a quiet, hollow resignation. I was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the bad guy. Tired of the endless, draining conflict. The thought of another phone call, another lecture, another guilt-ridden text made me feel physically ill. At that moment, surrender felt less like defeat and more like self-preservation. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and called my father. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You win. I'll sell the house." The relief in his voice was palpable, and it made my stomach churn. "I knew you'd see reason, Elena. You're a good daughter. This is the right thing to do." He immediately launched into logistics, talking about lawyers and paperwork. But I wasn't listening. A profound sense of despair washed over me. I had caved. I had let them bully me into giving up the one thing that was truly mine. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the dark, the rain lashing against my apartment window. I thought about my grandmother's face, her hopeful smile when she gave me the keys. I thought about Ben, and the look of disappointment he would have when I told him. I thought about Chloe, painting my beautiful, restored front door a tacky shade of pink. And for the first time, the despair began to curdle into something else, a slow, burning anger. It wasn't a loud, explosive rage. It was a cold, quiet fury that settled deep in my bones. How dare they? How dare they manipulate me, devalue my work, and steal my future, all while pretending it was for my own good? They had pushed me into a corner, and they thought they had won. But what they didn't realize is that when you push a creative, intelligent person into a corner, they don't just give up. They start looking for a different way out. And that's when the seed of an idea was planted. It started as a vague, vengeful thought. What if I just took a sledgehammer to the custom kitchen cabinets before I left? What if I accidentally flooded the brand new bathroom? But that wasn't me. Destruction wasn't my style. I was a builder, a preserver. My strength wasn't in tearing things down. It was in understanding how they were built, from the foundation up. And that's when it hit me. The house's greatest strength, its greatest value, was its history. The very thing my family mocked and dismissed was the key. For months, as part of the restoration, I had been diving deep into the property's past. I wasn't just renovating, I was excavating its story. I had spent countless hours at the city archives, poring over old blueprints, property deeds, and census records. I was doing it for my own satisfaction, to honor the house, but in doing so, I had stumbled upon something interesting. The house, built in 1922, was one of the first in the neighborhood designed by a man named Alistair Finch. Finch was a local architect, not nationally famous, but he had a small, devoted following among architectural historians for his unique twist on the craftsman style. My house was a prime example of his early work. At the time, it was just a fascinating piece of trivia. But now, sitting in my dark apartment, that piece of trivia began to glow with possibility. My city, like many others undergoing revitalization, had a robust historic preservation society. They were always looking for significant properties to add to the city's register of historic landmarks. Getting a house landmarked was a long, arduous process. It required meticulous documentation, a detailed architectural history, and proof of the property's cultural or historical significance. It was a mountain of paperwork and research that would deter most people. But for me, it was my job. It was what I did for a living. I was an expert in this exact process. A landmark designation came with a lot of prestige. It also came with a lot of rules. Strict rules. Rules that governed everything. You couldn't change the exterior. You couldn't alter the original floor plan. Any repairs or renovations had to be done with historically accurate materials and had to be approved by a review board. In essence, a historic landmark designation would freeze the house in time, preserving it exactly as it was. It would prevent anyone from, say, gutting the kitchen for a modern, soulless remodel. It would prevent them from painting the original oak woodwork white. It would prevent them from painting the front door millennial pink. A slow smile spread across my face for the first time in weeks. It was an audacious, brilliant plan. I would sell them the house, just as they demanded. I would let them have their victory. And then, long after the papers were signed and the money was transferred, they would discover that they hadn't bought a blank canvas for Chloe's whims. They had bought a museum piece. They would be the owners, but I, through the city's preservation laws, would be the eternal guardian of its soul. The plan was perfect, but the timing would be critical. I had to get the application submitted and, hopefully, approved before the sale was finalized. But the notification of the approval couldn't arrive until after they had the deed in their hands. It was a huge risk. If they found out what I was doing, the fallout would be nuclear. But the thought of their faces when they realized what I had done, it was a powerful motivator. I got up from the couch, turned on the lights, and walked to my desk. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and began to write. At the top of the page, in neat, architectural lettering, I wrote, "Project Isabella's Legacy." The despair was gone, replaced by a thrilling, dangerous sense of purpose. The war wasn't over. It had just gone underground, and they had absolutely no idea they were walking into the most elegant, well-documented, historically significant trap I could possibly design. The next 2 months were a masterclass in deception, a high-wire act of living a double life. On the surface, I was the defeated but dutiful daughter, meekly going through the motions of selling my beloved home. I answered my parents' calls with a resigned, quiet tone. I forwarded the documents they requested from my mortgage company. I even met Chloe for coffee, where I forced myself to smile and nod as she showed me her Pinterest boards, a horror show of shiplap walls, farmhouse sinks, and all-white modern aesthetics that would be the architectural equivalent of a lobotomy for my 1,920 bungalow. It's going to be so much more open and airy once we knock down these pointless little walls, she said, scrolling through photos. And we're definitely getting rid of that creepy old fireplace. I just sipped my latte, the ceramic warm against my fingers, and said, "That sounds like a lot of work." My voice a perfect mask of neutral observation. Inside, I was a covert operative, working with a singular, secret mission to get the house on the historic register before it was too late. My days were for them, but my nights were for me. As soon as I got home from my real job, my second job began. My apartment, once a place of rest, transformed into the headquarters for Operation Isabella's legacy. My dining table was buried under a mountain of books on architectural history, stacks of photocopied deeds, and high-resolution scans of Alistair Finch's original blueprints, which I had managed to track down in a dusty annex of the city library. I became a detective, hunting for every piece of evidence that would make my case to the Preservation Society undeniable. I documented every single detail of the restoration I had completed, framing it not as a renovation, but as a historically faithful preservation. I took hundreds of photos, cross-referencing my work with old photographs of the house I found in the city archives. The custom-milled woodwork I'd installed wasn't just a cosmetic upgrade. It was a precise replica of Finch's original design. The tile around the fireplace wasn't just a lucky find. It was a rare example from a local artisan company that had gone out of business in the 1,930 seconds. The application itself was a beast, over 100 pages long. It required a full chain of title history, a biography of the architect, a detailed analysis of the home's architectural style and its significance within the context of the neighborhood's development, and a complete report on its structural integrity. It was more intense than my master's thesis. To bolster my case, I knew I needed an ally, a professional witness who could lend credibility. I found him in a man named Dr. Arthur Vance, a retired architectural history professor from the local university. He was the city's foremost expert on Alistair Finch. I reached out to him under the guise of being a freelance architectural historian working on an article about Finch's early career. I couldn't risk using my real name or connecting it to my family. Our first meeting was at a quiet university cafe. Dr. Vance was a kind elderly man with a shock of white hair and twinkling eyes that lit up when I started talking about the bungalow. I showed him my research, the blueprints, the photos of the restoration. He was captivated. "My dear girl," he said, peering at a photo of the fireplace tile over his spectacles. "This is extraordinary. I've only ever read about this tile pattern in Finch's journals. To see it intact, it's a remarkable find." He agreed to write a letter of support for my application, a powerful endorsement that would carry significant weight with the review board. He had no idea of the family drama behind my academic interest, and I intended to keep it that way. The most nerve-wracking part was the official site visit from the Preservation Society's review committee. I had to schedule it on a weekday, taking a personal day from work and praying my family wouldn't decide to drop by unexpectedly. The 3 committee members, all serious-looking people in sensible shoes, walked through the house with clipboards, their faces unreadable. I led them on a tour, my heart pounding in my chest. I pointed out the quarter-sawn oak floors, the original wavy glass in the window panes I had carefully preserved, the unique cantilevered roof over the porch that was a signature of Finch's style. I was selling my house twice, in 2 completely different ways. To my family, I was selling a shell for their whims. To this committee, I was selling a story, a legacy. As they were leaving, the chairwoman, a stern-looking woman named Margaret, paused on the front porch. She ran her hand over the restored oak door, the one Chloe wanted to paint pink. "You've done a remarkable job here, miss." She paused, and I gave her the pseudonym I was using for this project. "Miss Cole, a truly remarkable job of preservation. We rarely see this level of care and respect for a building's history." It was the highest compliment I could have received, and it felt like a tiny drop of validation in an ocean of familial dismissal. The application was submitted. The letters of support were attached. The site visit was complete. Now all I could do was wait. The Society's board met on the first Tuesday of every month. The final sale of the house to my parents was scheduled for the 3rd Friday of that same month. The timeline was terrifyingly tight. The approval had to go through, but the official notification letter, a piece of mail sent via the notoriously slow postal service, had to arrive after I had cashed their check. During this waiting period, the pressure from my family actually intensified. Now that I had agreed to sell, they were in a rush. My dad called daily, asking if I had signed this document or faxed that form. Chloe started sending me links to furniture she was buying for her new house, asking my opinion on sofas and dining tables, a cruel pantomime of sisterly bonding. "Do you think this gray sectional is too boring?" she texted one day, along with a link to a hideous, oversized piece of furniture that would swallow the small living room whole. "I think you should get whatever makes you happy," I texted back, my fingers stiff. Each interaction was a test of my composure. I had to play the part of the good daughter to the very end, all while harboring a secret that would detonate our family dynamic. The stress was immense, but every time I felt my resolve weaken, I would picture that official letter from the Preservation Society, and I would keep going. It was my light at the end of the tunnel, the elegant, legal, and historically significant vengeance that they so richly deserved. The day of the negotiation was a day I will never forget. My father, in his infinite sense of authority, decided it shouldn't be handled over the phone or through lawyers initially. No, it had to be a formal family meeting at my parents' house. It was a power play, designed to have me on their turf, outnumbered and overwhelmed. I walked into the lion's den that Sunday afternoon feeling strangely calm. My secret plan was my armor. While they thought they were arranging my surrender, I knew I was orchestrating their defeat. The atmosphere in their cavernous, immaculately decorated living room was thick with a tense, triumphant energy. My father sat in his usual high-backed leather armchair, the throne from which he dispensed judgment. My mother perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, twisting her pearl necklace. And Chloe, my dear sister, was practically vibrating with excitement, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She was already mentally redecorating my life's work. "Elena, thank you for coming," my father began, as if I'd had a choice. "We wanted to do this face to finalize the details so we can move forward without any more unpleasantness." The subtext was clear. "You've caused enough trouble. Now, be a good girl and do as you're told." He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished coffee table. It wasn't a formal offer letter. It was a piece of his personal letterhead with a number written on it in his sharp, aggressive handwriting. $180,000. It was the same insulting number he had thrown out on the phone. Seeing it there in black and white, so stark and dismissive, sent a fresh wave of cold anger through me. "We feel this is a very generous offer," my father continued, leaning forward. "It covers what you originally paid for the property and gives you a little something for your trouble, a little something for my trouble, for 3 years of my life, for my blood, sweat, and tears, for the $70,000 of my own money I had poured into materials." He was essentially valuing my labor, my expertise, and the entire transformation of the house at absolutely nothing. I picked up the paper, my expression carefully neutral. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk about the real value of this house. The neighborhood has changed. I have the comps. Unrenovated homes are selling for significantly more than this. With the work I've done, the true market value is closer to $400,000. My father waved his hand, a gesture of complete dismissal. "Market value is irrelevant, Elena. This is a family matter. We are not real estate investors. We are helping your sister. That number is what the family can afford, and frankly, it's more than fair." What the family can afford? It was a blatant lie. My father had sold a portion of his business a few years back for a small fortune. They weren't short on cash. They were just short on respect for me. This was when Chloe decided to chime in, her voice dripping with a sickly, sweet concern. "Ellie, you have to understand. We're not trying to cheat you. But Rick and I have so many expenses coming up. We have to completely redo the kitchen. It's so dated. And the bathroom is just tiny. We'll probably have to knock out a wall to expand it. The renovations are going to cost a fortune." She said this with a completely straight face, complaining about the cost of destroying the very features that gave the house its value. She was complaining about having to pay to demolish my custom cabinetry, my restored clawfoot tub, my carefully sourced antique light fixtures. The audacity was breathtaking. "And besides," she added, a sly look in her eye. "You didn't have to spend all that money on it. You could have just put in some cheap laminate floors and a coat of paint. You're the one who got carried away with your little project." There it was again. My passion, my career, my life's work, reduced to a little project. They were a united front of delusion. They had convinced themselves that their actions were not only justified but noble. They were the saviors, and I was the ungrateful, difficult daughter who was being selfish with her hobby house. I looked from my father's stony face to my mother's pleading eyes to Chloe's smug grin. I knew, at that moment, that there was no point in arguing. You cannot reason with people who have already rewritten reality to suit their needs. Arguing would only make me look hysterical and unreasonable, playing right into their narrative. So, I took a different tack. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. I looked down at the paper in my hand, then back up at them. I let a single calculated tear well up in my eye and trace a slow path down my cheek. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. "Okay," I whispered, my voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "If this is what it takes to make the family happy, then okay." The shift in the room was immediate. The tension dissolved, replaced by a wave of magnanimous relief. My mother rushed over to hug me. "Oh, Elena, thank you. I knew you would do the right thing. You have such a good heart." My father gave a curt, satisfied nod. "Good. I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork tomorrow. This is for the best. You'll see." Chloe clapped her hands together like a child on Christmas morning. "Yay! Oh, Ellie, thank you. You won't regret this. We're going to be so happy there. You won't regret this." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Oh, I knew who was going to have regrets, and it certainly wasn't going to be me. I let them believe they had won. I let them comfort their weeping, defeated daughter. I played my part to perfection. As my mother hugged me, patting my back, I looked over her shoulder at Chloe, who was already texting her boyfriend Rick, no doubt sharing the good news. A cold, clear thought cut through my performance. Enjoy the victory, because it's going to be the shortest one of your entire life. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in months. They thought they had broken me. In reality, they had just handed me the final piece of motivation I needed. They had confirmed that my secret plan wasn't just clever. It was a necessary act of justice, and I was going to enjoy every single moment of its execution. The closing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at my father's lawyer's office. The entire week leading up to it felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. I packed up the last of my personal belongings from the bungalow on Maple Street, each box a painful little goodbye. I wrapped my grandmother's old reading glasses, which I kept on the nightstand. I carefully dug up a few of the heritage rose bushes from the garden, potting them to take to my apartment. It felt like I was curating an exhibition of a life I was about to lose. Every corner of the house held a memory of laughter with Ben, of quiet satisfaction at a job well done, of a future I had so carefully planned. My family, of course, interpreted my somber mood as sadness over the sale. "It's for the best, honey," my mother would say over the phone. "Once it's done, you'll feel so much better. A clean break. A clean break." It was more like an amputation. The day of the signing was gray and overcast, a perfect, pathetic fallacy for the occasion. I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a simple black dress, understated and professional. I wanted to look composed, defeated but dignified. I walked into the law office, a place of mahogany walls and hushed tones, to find my family already there. They were practically glowing. My father was chatting jovially with his lawyer, a man named Mr. Thompson who had been handling our family's affairs for years. Chloe was there with her boyfriend Rick, both of them dressed up, holding hands and whispering excitedly. They looked like a young couple about to be handed the keys to their dream life. And in their minds, that's exactly what was happening. My mother gave me a tight, reassuring hug, whispering, "It will all be over soon." We were ushered into a conference room with a long, polished table. Mr. Thompson laid out a mountain of paperwork: the final purchase agreement, The title transfer, the deed. He explained each document in a dry, monotonous voice. But I wasn't really listening to the words. I was watching my family. I was watching the smug satisfaction on my father's face as he saw his plan come to fruition. I was watching Chloe, who couldn't stop fidgeting, her eyes wide with a greedy, impatient excitement. She was already living in the house, in the future she had so effortlessly stolen. Rick, her boyfriend, had the look of a man who had just hit the lottery. He was looking at me with a sort of pitying gratitude, as if I were a benevolent fool making his dreams possible. They were so sure of their victory, so blissfully unaware of the legal, historical, and architectural time bomb that was ticking away at the city's preservation society. Just that morning, I had received a discreet, encrypted email from my contact on the inside, a junior staffer I had befriended. The subject line was a single word: approved. The landmark designation was a done deal. The official letter was already in the mail. All I had to do was get through this signing. Elena? Mr. Thompson's voice cut through my thoughts. If you could just sign here, here, and here. He pushed the stack of papers toward me, a pen resting on top. This was it, the point of no return. I picked up the pen, the plastic cool and heavy in my hand. For a split second, I hesitated. A wave of panic washed over me. What if I was wrong? What if this blew up in my face? I looked across the table at my sister. She gave me a little encouraging smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator who had successfully cornered her prey. And in that moment, all my doubts vanished. I thought of my grandmother's note. Make this old house sing again. I wasn't breaking my promise to her. I was fulfilling it in the most permanent way imaginable. I was ensuring that no one could ever silence its song. I took a deep breath and began to sign. My signature, usually a fluid script, was tight and controlled. Page after page, I signed away the legal ownership of my home. With the final stroke of the pen, it was done. My father slid a cashier's check across the table. $180,000. The price of my soul, I thought grimly. I picked it up without looking at it and tucked it into my purse. A round of cheerful, relieved applause broke out from their side of the table. Chloe jumped up and threw her arms around me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ellie, she squealed in my ear. You're the best sister ever. We're going to have a housewarming party as soon as we knock out the kitchen wall, and you're totally invited. I just patted her on the back, my face a carefully constructed mask of melancholic acceptance. Congratulations, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet. I hope you'll be very happy there. My father stood up and shook my hand, a firm, patronizing grip. You did the right thing, Elena. I'm proud of you. Proud of me. He had never said he was proud of me when I graduated with honors. He had never said he was proud of me when I got my architect's license. He had never said he was proud of me when I single-handedly restored a historic home. But now, in my moment of defeat, in my act of submission, he was proud. The absurdity of it was almost too much to bear. As they all filed out of the office, chattering about renovation plans and paint colors, I stayed behind for a moment, gathering my things. Mr. Thompson looked at me with an unreadable expression. He had known me since I was a child. He knew what that house meant to me. Are you all right, Elena? He asked, his professional demeanor softening for a moment. I gave him a small, cryptic smile. I will be, Mr. Thompson, I said. I think everything is going to work out exactly as it should. I walked out of that law office and into the gray afternoon. The check in my purse felt cold and heavy, a cheap consolation prize, but the secret I held in my heart felt like a warm, glowing ember. They had the house. They had the deed. They had their victory. But they had no idea that the real closing, the one that truly mattered, was still a few business days away, slowly making its way through the U.S. postal system in a crisp, official-looking envelope. And that was a closing they were not going to enjoy. For the next 2 weeks, I laid low. I deposited their check, paid off the remaining mortgage on the bungalow, and put the rest, a pitifully small sum after all my expenses, into a high-yield savings account. I focused on my work at the firm, throwing myself into a new project designing a public park. I needed the distraction. I ignored my mother's cheerful calls, letting them go to voicemail. I muted the family group chat, which was now flooded with pictures of Chloe and Rick posing with a "sold" sign in front of my house, and daily updates on their renovation plans. Day 1. Demolition planning. One text read, accompanied by a picture of Chloe gleefully holding a sledgehammer. It was like watching someone post happy vacation photos from a place they had just burned to the ground. Ben was my lifeline. He knew the whole plan, and the waiting was killing him almost as much as it was me. Has the letter arrived yet? He'd text me every day. Not yet, I'd reply. Patience, my friend. Good things come to those who wait. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I was in a meeting with a client, and my phone buzzed in my purse. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again, and again. 5 missed calls in 3 minutes. Then came a frantic text message, a string of words in all caps with a dozen question mark emojis. Alina, call me right now. What is this letter from the city? I had to excuse myself from the meeting, my heart doing a wild tap dance against my ribs. I walked out into the hallway, took a deep, steadying breath, and called her back. She picked up on the first ring. What did you do? She shrieked, her voice high and panicked. There was no hello, no preamble, just pure, unadulterated fury. I have no idea what you're talking about, Chloe, I said, my voice calm and cool as ice. What letter? Don't you play dumb with me, she yelled. We got this official letter from the City of Westbrook Preservation Society. It says the house on Maple Street has been designated a historic landmark. It says we can't make any changes without board approval. It says we can't touch the exterior or the original floor plan. What the hell is this? I let her finish her tirade, the sound of her panic a sweet symphony to my ears. I could picture her standing in my beautiful, perfect kitchen, a piece of official city letterhead trembling in her hand, her world of easy renovations and millennial pink doors crumbling around her. A historic landmark? I said, feigning surprise. Wow, that's a huge honor. Grandma Isabella would be so proud. That house is a real piece of city history. Proud, proud, she screamed. I don't care about history, Elena. I care about the fact that I just paid a contractor a $10,000 deposit to knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. A wall that, according to this stupid letter, is a key structural and historical feature that can't be touched. What did you do? This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. I dropped the pretense of innocence. My voice became firm, clear, and devoid of apology. I didn't do anything to you, Chloe. I did something for the house. I did what Grandma Isabella asked me to do. I made it sing again, and I took steps to ensure that its song would be preserved forever. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as the reality of the situation began to dawn on her. You did this on purpose, she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. You knew this was going to happen when you sold us the house. I sold you the house, Chloe, I corrected her. The physical structure, the deed, it's all yours. But the legacy of that house, its history, its soul, that was never for sale. I simply ensured that the city would protect it from people who wouldn't appreciate it. Appreciate it? She sputtered. We were going to make it beautiful. We were going to make it modern. You were going to gut it, I said, my voice cold. You were going to strip it of every ounce of character and turn it into a cheap, generic flip house. You told me yourself. You saw my life's work as a series of inconveniences to be demolished. You called my grandmother's home dated and creepy. You don't get to do that. Not to her memory, not to my work. She was crying now, the angry shrieks replaced by choked, frustrated sobs. But what are we supposed to do now? We can't live here like this. The kitchen is too small. We can't change anything. You can live there, I said simply. You just have to live there in the house as at Island. Or if you want to make changes, you can submit an application to the review board. You'll have to use historically accurate materials, of course. That custom-milled oak for the cabinets is a bit pricey, and the 1922nd style tile can be hard to source. But I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're the owner, after all. It's your responsibility now. The beautiful, elegant cruelty of it all was finally settling in. I had trapped her. She was the proud owner of a priceless piece of architectural history that she was legally forbidden from destroying. She was chained to the very character and integrity she had so gleefully planned to erase. "Dad is going to kill you," she finally managed to say, her voice thick with tears and impotent rage. "Oh, I'm counting on it," I replied, a real smile finally breaking across my face. "Tell him, and Mom, that I'll be expecting their call. I have a lot I'd like to discuss with them." I hung up the phone, ending the call in the middle of her sob. I walked back to my office, the adrenaline singing in my veins. The bomb had detonated, and I was ready for the fallout. The fallout arrived on my doorstep less than an hour later. I knew they wouldn't bother calling. This was a level 5 family crisis, which required a full in-person confrontation. My apartment buzzer shrieked, a long, angry buzz that told me exactly who was downstairs. I calmly let them in and waited by my door. When it opened, it was a scene of pure, unadulterated fury. My father stood in the front, his face a thunderous shade of red I hadn't seen since I was a teenager and had dared to talk back to him. My mother was right behind him, her face pale and pinched, looking like she was about to faint. And Chloe trailed behind them, her face blotchy and swollen from crying, with her boyfriend Rick hovering uselessly in the hallway behind her, clearly wanting no part of this. "How dare you?" my father bit out, storming into my apartment without an invitation. He was practically radiating rage. "How dare you humiliate this family, deceive us, and pull a stunt like this?" I closed the door calmly behind them and leaned against it, crossing my arms. I refused to let him intimidate me. Not anymore. This was my space, my rules. "Humiliate you?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I think you have that backward. For months you humiliated me. You devalued my work, dismissed my passion, and emotionally blackmailed me into selling my home for a fraction of its worth. What did you think was going to happen? That I would just thank you for the privilege? This was a family agreement," he roared, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You agreed to the price. You signed the papers." "Yes, I did," I said, pushing myself off the door and walking slowly toward the center of the room. I felt a strange sense of clarity, of power I had never felt before. The fear was gone. "I signed the papers that made you the legal owners of the property, but I also filed the paperwork that made the city the legal protector of its history. I did nothing illegal. In fact, I did something civic-minded. I preserved a piece of our city's architectural heritage. You should be thanking me." That's when my mother found her voice, a high, trembling wail. "Elena, how could you be so cruel? So vindictive? Your sister is devastated. Her dreams are ruined." "Her dreams?" I turned to face my mother, my eyes hard. "What about my dreams? Did either of you ever, for 1 second, consider my dreams when you were orchestrating this little theft? Did you think about the future I was building in that house? The financial security I had earned for myself? Or was it only ever about Chloe's dreams, Chloe's wants, Chloe's needs?" I walked over to my sister, who was still sniffling dramatically by the doorway. "You wanted a house, Chloe. Now you have one. A beautiful, historically significant, award-worthy house. Most people would be thrilled. The only dream that's ruined is your dream of tearing it apart and turning it into some soulless, gray and white box from a discount furniture catalog. Chloe flinched as if I'd slapped her. "But it's ours," she cried. "We should be able to do what we want with it." "And that right there," I said, turning back to my parents, "is the entire problem. That is the philosophy you have instilled in her entire life. I want it, so it should be mine, and I should be able to do whatever I want with it, regardless of its history, its value, or who it hurts." Well, welcome to the real world. A world where actions have consequences, and where you can't just bulldoze over everything you don't immediately understand or appreciate. My father's face was contorted with a rage that seemed to leave him speechless. He had built his entire life on being the one in control, the one whose word was final. I had taken that control away from him using the very tools he claimed to respect: logic, paperwork, and the law. He had come here for a fight, for an apology, for my submission. He was getting a lecture on his own failings as a parent. "We are going to sue you," he finally managed to say, his voice low and threatening. "We are going to sue you for fraud, for misrepresentation." "On what grounds?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. I had consulted with Ben's brother, a real estate lawyer, before I even started this. I knew my legal standing was rock solid. Did I ever, at any point, lie about the condition of the house? No. Did I fail to disclose any material defects? No. The historic designation isn't a defect. It's a prestigious honor that actually increases the property's cultural value. You bought a house, and you got exactly what was on the deed. The fact that you didn't do your own due diligence, that you were so blinded by your own arrogance that you never bothered to truly understand the asset you were acquiring, that's not my fault. That's yours. I let that sink in. The word arrogance hung in the air between us. No one had ever spoken to my father like that. He looked stunned, as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. My mother just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, as if seeing me for the first time. Not as her quiet, accommodating daughter, but as a formidable stranger. "This is what you wanted," I said, my voice softening slightly but losing none of its steel. "You wanted me to act in the best interest of the family. And I did. I secured our grandmother's legacy forever. I protected a valuable family asset from being devalued and destroyed by a bad renovation. And I taught my little sister a valuable lesson about responsibility and respecting things that are older and more important than her fleeting whims. From where I'm standing, it looks like I did exactly what was best for the family." The silence that followed was absolute. They had no counter-argument. I had used their own twisted logic against them. They had come to my home to corner me, to demand I fix the problem I had created. Instead, I had shown them that the problem was, and always had been, them. Their entitlement, their favoritism, their profound and willful blindness. There was nothing left to say. They had lost, and they knew it. The confrontation in my apartment wasn't the end of the story, but it was the end of the war. What followed was the long, messy, and deeply satisfying aftermath. My family retreated from my apartment that day, not with angry shouts, but with a stunned, defeated silence. They had come expecting a battle they could win through sheer force of will, and they had been met with a checkmate they couldn't comprehend. The consequences of their actions, and my reaction, began to unfold almost immediately. Chloe and Rick were the first to face the new reality. They were stuck. They owned a house they now hated, a house that was a constant reminder of their thwarted plans. The $10,000 deposit they had given the contractor was non-refundable, a fact he was all too happy to point out. So they were out $10,000 before they had even moved in. They tried to live in the bungalow, but it was a disaster from the start. Chloe complained incessantly. The kitchen was too small for her imaginary dinner parties. The original hardwood floors, which I had so lovingly restored, were apparently a nightmare to keep clean compared to her preferred cheap vinyl planking. She hated the dark wood, the classic light fixtures, the very soul of the house. It wasn't the bright, sterile, Instagram-friendly backdrop she had envisioned for her influencer career. I heard through the grapevine, a sympathetic cousin, that they had submitted an application to the Preservation Society to paint the front door. It was a single, one-page form asking for a color change. The board responded with a 6-page request for a historical color analysis, a paint chip sample for review, and a detailed explanation of how the proposed color would adhere to the 1,920 seconds Craftsman-era palette. The application was, of course, denied. The door remained a beautiful, dark oak. Their misery was my quiet victory, but the real consequences ran deeper than a paint color. My parents had financed the purchase by taking out a significant home equity loan on their own house. They had essentially gambled a huge chunk of their retirement savings on this plan, assuming it was a straightforward transaction. Now, they were financially tied to a property that was causing nothing but grief. They explored their options. Could they sell it? Of course. But the landmark designation changed the game entirely. The pool of potential buyers was now much smaller. It was no longer a starter home for a young couple looking to modernize. It was a specialty property for a niche buyer, someone who loved historical architecture and was willing to be a steward of the past. Such buyers exist, but they are rare, and they are not known for overpaying. The huge profit they had envisioned from a quick flip, or the long-term equity Chloe would have gained, had vanished. Worse, any real estate agent would have to legally disclose the landmark status, and the story of how it came to be was already becoming a piece of local gossip in the real estate community. The house was now the Spite House, a property with a story, which made it even harder to sell cleanly. The financial strain started to crack the family's united front. My father, I heard, was furious with Chloe and Rick for not being able to make it work. He saw their misery not as a consequence of his own actions, but as their personal failure. Chloe and Rick's relationship, which had been built on a foundation of big ideas and my parents' money, started to crumble under the weight of actual responsibility and disappointment. They broke up about 4 months after the signing. Rick moved out, and Chloe was left alone in a house she despised, with a monthly mortgage payment she couldn't afford on her influencer income. The ultimate irony was that she had to get a real job, working as a receptionist at a dental office, just to make ends meet. The stability my parents had tried to force upon her had materialized, but it looked nothing like the easy, beautiful life she had imagined. My relationship with my parents entered a deep freeze. For months, we didn't speak. My father was too proud and too angry to admit defeat. My mother, I suspect, was caught between her loyalty to him and a dawning, horrifying realization of the role she had played in all of this. She had been the enabler, the peacekeeper who had sacrificed one daughter for the other, and the peace had been shattered anyway. The silence was painful, but it was also clean. For the first time in my life, there were no expectations, no guilt trips, no manipulative phone calls. There was just space. Space for me to breathe, to live, to build a life free from their orbit. I used the money from the sale, meager as it was, as a down payment on a stunning loft apartment in a converted warehouse downtown, a place with high ceilings, exposed brick, and huge windows, a space that was entirely, unapologetically me. I invested in my business. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the years of the house restoration. My relationship with Ben, which had always been a deep friendship, blossomed into something more. He had been my rock, my co-conspirator, and my biggest defender. He had seen me at my lowest and had helped me fight my way back to the top. We were building something new, just for us. And the house on Maple Street? It sat there, beautiful and preserved, a quiet monument to my victory. Chloe eventually had to move out, renting it to a young history professor and his wife who were absolutely enchanted with it. They sent me a letter, forwarded by my cousin, thanking me for my work in preserving such a local treasure. They had found my name in the landmark application file at the city archives. They were the stewards the house had always deserved. My family's grand plan had failed in every conceivable way. They had lost money. They had fractured their relationships. They had exposed the ugly, entitled core of their family dynamic, and I had gained everything. My freedom, my self-respect, a new home, a new love, and the profound, quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had not only saved my grandmother's house, but I had also, finally, saved myself. It's been a little over a year since the day my family stormed into my apartment. The world didn't end, but the world we knew as a family certainly did. It was dismantled, piece by painful piece, and what's being rebuilt in its place is something entirely different, something more honest, and a lot quieter. The first olive branch came, surprisingly, from my mother. It was about 6 months after the confrontation. I received a short, simple text message. "I'm sorry, Elena. I was wrong." There was no justification, no excuse, no attempt to shift blame, just a plain, unvarnished admission. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. It didn't erase the hurt, but it cracked open a door that I thought was sealed shut forever. We started talking again, slowly at first. Awkward phone calls that were full of long silences. But gradually, we found a new way to communicate. For the first time, she asked me about my work with genuine interest. She asked about Ben. She asked about my new apartment. She stopped talking about Chloe's problems and started listening to my life. During one of these calls, she confessed something that stunned me. "Your father, he's been different since that day," she said, her voice quiet. "He doesn't talk about it, but I see it. He walks around the house like a stranger. I think for the first time in his life, he encountered something he couldn't control, and it was his own daughter. I think you earned his respect, Elena, even if he'll never admit it. Respect. It wasn't love, and it wasn't an apology, but from my father, it was more than I had ever gotten before. I still don't have a relationship with him, not really. We see each other at holidays. We exchange polite, surface-level pleasantries. But the dynamic of power is gone. He doesn't lecture me or dismiss me. He just watches me. And maybe my mom is right. Maybe in that silent observation there is a grudging, newfound respect. As for Chloe, her journey has been the most transformative. Being forced to get a real job, to pay her own rent, to live within her means, was the shock to the system she had needed her entire life. She sold her designer clothes on Poshmark. She learned how to budget. She stopped trying to be an influencer and started trying to be a person. Our relationship is still a work in progress. The betrayal was deep, and trust doesn't regrow overnight. But a few months ago, she called me and asked if I could help her with her resume. It was a small, humble request, but it was a monumental step. It was the first time she had ever asked me for my expertise instead of my money. I helped her. We're not the close, loving sisters I once dreamed of being, but we are something new, something more real. Two women who are finally seeing each other for who they truly are, not the roles we were assigned at birth. And me? My life is unrecognizable from the one I was living a year ago. My loft is my sanctuary, filled with light and art and plants. My landscape architecture business is thriving. The story of the Maple Street house, once a whispered piece of real estate gossip, actually became a positive talking point for me professionally. Clients who valued historic preservation sought me out. They wanted the architect who was so dedicated to her craft that she literally filed a landmark designation to protect her work. My Spite House had become my ultimate portfolio piece. Ben and I are partners, in every sense of the word. We're building a life together, a life based on mutual respect, shared passions, and a lot of laughter. We're talking about buying a piece of land in the countryside, a place where we can build a home from the ground up, together, with no ghosts of the past, only promises of the future. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the lesson in all of this. For years, I thought that family meant sacrifice. It meant putting my own needs last, keeping the peace at any cost, and accepting love that was conditional and transactional. I thought that by being the good daughter, the responsible one, I could eventually earn the love and respect I craved. I was wrong. The greatest act of love I ever committed for my family was saying no, by setting a hard boundary, by refusing to be their scapegoat and their safety net. I forced them, and myself, to grow. They had to learn to stand on their own, and I had to learn that my worth wasn't determined by my usefulness to them. My worth was inherent. It was in the skills in my hands, the vision in my mind, and the strength in my heart. The bungalow on Maple Street is still there, of course, beautifully maintained by the history professor and his wife. I drive by it sometimes. It doesn't hurt anymore. I feel a quiet sense of pride. I saved it. I fulfilled my promise to my grandmother. The house is still singing, and its song is one of resilience, integrity, and the enduring power of a legacy that is respected. It taught me that a home isn't just four walls and a roof. A true home is a place where you are seen, valued, and respected for who you are. And if you can't find that home with the family you were given, sometimes you have to have the courage to build it for yourself. If you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own peace and your own future, I want you to know that you are not alone. Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. What did you learn from setting boundaries in your own life? And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like and subscribe button, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that their strength is their greatest asset. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to preserve what is truly valuable in your own life.